Hello and welcome to The Print. I am Sumi Sukanya Datta and we have with us today veteran diabetologist and director of Mohan's Diabetes Center in Chennai, Dr. V. Mohan. We will discuss the implications of the International Diabetes Federation stating that a 1 hour post-load plasma glucose test is a more sensitive and practical method to screen for intermediate hypoglycemia or pre-diabetes and type 2 diabetes in people at risk. Welcome to the show, Dr. Mohan. You were among 22 experts who contributed to this statement
Yes,
recently.
that is true.
So, please help us understand what is the current practice now and when it comes to screening for pre-diabetes and type 2 diabetes in people at risk. What is the current way of
Yeah,
screening people?
thank you very much, Sumi, for your interest in this particular problem. So let me give you the background of this.
Mm-hmm.
For years, for decades, in fact, the gold standard for diagnosis of diabetes has been a test called as the oral glucose tolerance test, or OGTT for short. Now, this
Okay.
has been there from 1950s, 60s, and 70s. And the criteria for which you diagnose might have changed a little bit over the years, but this test, the fasting you take in the empty stomach after 8 or 10 hours, you draw a blood sample that's called as the fasting sample. You can also call it as a 0 minute sample. Then you give 75 grams of glucose and then take the blood at different time points. So the original OGTT, which in my father's time and all that, when it was started, he was, as you know, the first diabetologist of India. 1940s itself he had started the
Mm-hmm.
diabetes clinic in Chennai. So during his time, the OGTT test, and even when I joined him in 1971, it was a 5 sample test, which means you draw the fasting blood 0 minute, then 30, 60, 90, and 120. So 5 samples. So you draw blood 5 times.
5 pricks,
Then
basically.
5 pricks basically.
Yeah.
And then you will get a curve like that because the glucose will go up, it may come down. So in a normal person, everything will be normal. Fasting will be normal. It will
Mm-hmm.
begin to go up, but by the time insulin will come, and then it'll bring it down to normal. So the whole curve will be within normal limits. In a person with severe diabetes, the fasting itself will be very high. And if it's very high, you actually don't need an OGTT because fasting
Mm-hmm.
itself is diagnostic of diabetes. So generally, the OGTT test is done in people with milder diabetes, or if you're not sure if you have diabetes, you want to rule out diabetes. Somebody comes with 300, 400 blood sugar, even a random blood sugar is enough. That will diagnose diabetes. Apart from that, you have the HbA1c test, 3 months control test. If that is above 6.57, 8, 9, you're already diabetic. You don't need the GTT, give them 75-gram glucose and weight and so on. But getting back to the OGTT, when somebody goes to a master health checkup or something, they find out whether I'm diabetic or not. Then the glucose test was done and 5 samples were done. Now, in 1979, the US based National Diabetes Data Group, a group of people joined together and they said all these 5 samples and all that are not needed. Just the first and the last are sufficient, the
Okay.
fasting and the 120.
Mm-hmm.
So the 30, 60, and 90 were all dropped. Okay. And since then, for all epidemiological studies, clinical studies, in most parts of the world, they use a fasting and a 2 hour value. And I'll tell you the normal values. If the fasting is below 100, it is normal. If the fasting is between 100 to 125, it is pre-diabetes. And if it's 126 and above, because 126 comes because it's 7 millimoles and 1 millimole is 18 milligrams. So 126 we use milligrams in India, and US also uses milligrams. The rest of the world uses millimoles. So if it's 7 millimoles or above, there's 126 and above in fasting, you're already diabetic. You don't need a GTT at all. Okay. In fact, when people come for to do an OGTT, first thing we'll do is we'll just check a fasting and see. If it is 200, 300, we'll say you don't need this GTT. You go on and we'll treat you as diabetic. But suppose it is not, then we give the glucose and then we find out. So coming back to the 2 hours, as I told you, the fasting below 100 is
Mm-hmm.
normal. 100 to 125, 101 to 125 is fasting, impaired fasting glucose, or one form of pre-diabetes, and 126 is diabetic. Now, what about the 2 hour value? After giving glucose at 2 hours, If it is 140 and below, it is normal. If it is 141 to 199, it is pre-diabetes. Another form of pre-diabetes called as impaired glucose tolerance or IGT, because this is a glucose tolerance now. You're giving
Right.
glucose. And then so the other is called impaired fasting glucose. It's called impaired glucose tolerance. And 200 and above is diabetic. So if it's 126 fasting or 200 after glucose, it is diabetic. If it's 100 to 125 or 141 to 199, it is one of the pre-diabetes forms. Now that pre-diabetes has been recently, very recently called as intermediate hyperglycemia by the International Diabetes Federation. They are saying don't call it as pre-diabetes, because why they object to pre-diabetes? Pre-diabetes, you are going to get diabetes.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, but about one third of them will never get diabetes, even though they have that position. So I said, how can you call it pre-diabetes? We're not going to get diabetes. So
Mm-hmm.
they said, let's call it intermediate hyperglycemia. So that's a new term. But essentially, it means either you have IFG, impaired fasting glucose, or impaired glucose tolerance. Now coming to the 1 hour. Now, when my traditional diabetologists like my father and all were there, we had being brought up by him. I had argued and said, when the world has gone to 2 samples, how can you take 5 samples and keep poking people 5 times a day and all that? This is not on. But he refused. Till his death in 1996, at all our centers across India, his center, my center, and we all did 5 samples only, because he said every value is important.
Mm-hmm.
And so we cannot skip that. So original test, how can you modify the test? You cannot modify the test. So we went on taking 5 samples. Now, after his death, what happened was, I said this 5 sample and all is too much. So we started doing mathematical
Mm-hmm.
calculations, seeing which of these we can eliminate. So from the mathematical statistical analysis we did, we found the 30 and the 90 were not that important. So we started using, somewhere for the last 20 years or so, we have been using fasting 1 hour and 2 hour value.
Yes.
So now the 1 hour comes in. Now, when does this 1 hour become important? Suppose the fasting is normal. Okay, 2 hours is also normal. So we'll call them as normal now. For all practical purposes, we call them as normal now. But when you do the 1 hour, you will find there are a set of people in whom fasting is only 90 or below 100. 2 hours is also only 120 or below that 140. But this 1 hour will jump up. Okay, and we found on follow-up after 10-15 years, when we followed up these people, those who had this elevated 1 hour value, only that peak going up, they were the ones who are converting to diabetes. So we published a
Okay.
series of papers from India. That is why I was included as an author. 3 or 4 papers we published showing that this 1 hour value is very important, and we shouldn't leave out this 1 hour. It's okay
Mm-hmm.
if we leave out 30 and 90. In fact, 30 has its own uses. We won't get into that now. But 60, and my father was right. Each one of them had its own importance. But the 1 hour value, we all kept publishing it. Meanwhile, all over the world, there were some traditional diabetologists who did not give up the 1 hour value. So they had their series, and they also kept publishing, saying this 1 hour seems to be very important. We shouldn't get rid of it. So a series, this 22 experts who got together, they had all been publishing in different from US, from Germany, from UK, from different places, saying that this 1 hour. And interestingly enough, while we don't agree in many things in medicine, this 155 value, everybody agreed. Everybody got the same thing, that at
Mm-hmm.
155 and above, you progressed to diabetes. Now think about it. Your fasting is normal, 2 hour is normal, so you're technically normal. But here is a stage where the 1 hour is high. We can't call it pre-diabetes or intermediate hyperglycemia, because it doesn't satisfy the criteria. So this is like a pre-diabetes, and they are the
Okay.
ones who will progress to pre-diabetes and diabetes.
Diabetes.
Now, since we are all interested in preventing diabetes and reversing diabetes, if during this test, think about the situation, you're doing a fasting, we're doing a 2 hour, and the patient is sitting in the clinic at that time doing nothing. All we're saying is draw one more sample
Mm-hmm.
and see whether you're detecting an earlier pre-diabetic kind of a stage. We don't call it pre-diabetes, we call it as early glucose intolerance, even earlier than the pre-diabetes. Okay, and we said if that 1 hour is also normal, leave them alone, because they are not going to progress at all. They are the real normals. Okay, then if the 1 hour is high, it's the stage before pre-diabetes. Then if the fasting becomes a little high, 2 hour becomes a little high, it's pre-diabetes. If the fasting becomes really high and the 2 hours really high, you're diabetic. So now we have these stages very clearly laid out. Luckily for us, everybody in the world who had done this research all got the same observation. So we started first writing saying that it's time we brought this 1 hour back. Okay, why are we wasting not taking a sample, simply losing an opportunity there while the patient is simply sitting? They can't go anywhere, by the way. By the 2 hours, they're not allowed to go out, come back. You must sit in one place while the test is going on. Otherwise, it'll affect the 2 hour value. Okay, when they're simply sitting, you might as well take one more sample. That's all.
Mhm.
And glucose is a very not a costly test at all. It costs some 20 rupees, 30 rupees to do a test. So why are you missing this golden opportunity? That is the thing that we said. Now, this group of scientists got together, and after some publications, we then approached the International Diabetes Federation and said that I think officially the International Diabetes Federation incidentally represents some 100 odd countries, and all the diabetic associations of all the entire world, they're all members of the International Diabetes Federation, including two associations in India, China, everywhere. Every
Mhm.
country in the world is represented in the International Diabetes Federation. So we said, let's write a position statement, as I mean, collecting all the literature on the 1 hour value and make a case for bringing the 1 hour value back, what we dropped in 1979. So that is how this paper got published. And when it got published, because it's coming from the International Diabetes Federation, the world's largest body, it really caught the attention of people. And now each association, in India there are two associations, we are all going to support it and say we support this IF thing. And therefore, all labs in India should also start doing. We were already doing. We never dropped the 1 hour. For the last 40 years, every OGTT we have 1 hour value. Okay.
Yeah.
Others don't have it because they're not been collecting the data, so they
Right.
don't have that 1 hour value. Now we are suggesting all labs, you please do the 1 hour value also. If it's above 155, tell the you don't need medication or don't need anything, but tell them that you're very early stage and therefore you can start walking, cutting down sugar,
Mhm.
taking precautions, and so on. And if it is below 155, tell them it's normal. It also depends on when they should come back for the next test. Suppose it is 155 and above, then we may call them back after 6 months or 1 year. If it is below 155, we'll say we'll see you after 3 years or 5 years because there's no immediate risk of you turning diabetes. That means we can save a lot of people from going through unnecessary OGTTs every
Yeah.
year. So that is the how the 1 hour value evolved, and that is the current status of this.
Yeah. So the thing is that instead of doing two pricks, you are now
Three,
suggesting the labs to do three tests,
one
right?
extra one.
That is how it will
That's
start.
exactly how it is. Yeah.
Yeah. So do you see it getting incorporated in diagnostic practice in India anytime soon? Do you think it's
It
very
will,
pretty soon?
because I think the once the major associations like the Research Society for Study of Diabetes in India, and
Mm-hmm.
I have already told the president, and I was a past president. I've told the present president, secretary, the editors of our journal to endorse this and say the idea of, because this one has like 250 references on this, 250
Okay.
papers published on
Okay.
it. So I said, let's refer to that and say the IDF has suggested this. It's a very simple thing. Do one more sample and let's make it a mandate for all labs to do it. Now, some labs are already doing it. So it's not
Yeah.
that no labs are doing it. There are
But
some labs
roughly,
doing it,
what would be the percentage of labs which are already doing it?
about 10%. About
Okay.
10% of labs are probably doing it, and
Okay.
90%
But
are not
majority of the labs only
are
do the
not doing it
fasting
now.
and 2 hour test.
That's everybody else does. Fasting 2 hours is a must. So that
Yeah.
everybody does. There's
Hmm.
1 hour, maybe 10% or 15% of people may be doing it. The others are not doing it. Now I suspect it will start getting done
But
by many more people.
there is a practical thing I see there because you mentioned that many people nowadays also there is at home collection of samples,
Yeah, yeah.
Many people also, so will it be convenient from convenience point of view? Do you see labs doing it?
So, what we are saying in the position statement, although I'm an author in that, there are one or two things in the position statement which not everybody will agree. Not all
Mm-hmm.
the 22 authors agreed with some of them. One of the suggestion, which is some of the authors are very passionate about the 1 hour. So
Mm-hmm.
what they're saying is get rid of the 2 hour, okay, and use only 1 hour. So the test is being shortened to
Mm-hmm.
1 hour, and they are saying the 1 hour equal to 209 is actually equal to 200 of 2 hours. And why are we doing 2 hours? We can terminate the test
Okay.
at 1 hour. There are others who are saying you do the 1 hour first, and if it is high, call them back for the 2 hour on another day. No, that's not practical at all. How can
Mm-hmm.
people come back and suppose they're coming from 200 miles away? They can't go back and while they're sitting there, you might as well take one more sample, isn't it?
Right, right.
So people like me, what we are saying is let the 0 and 2 hour remain. It's been there now for 40
Just
years,
introduce
42
one
years.
one more
Just
test
add
in
one more
between.
value. That's all. And use that 1 hour value only if the other two are normal. That's what we're
Hmm.
saying. The whole idea is to pick up an earlier stage, not to create more confusion in the field. The other thing is, for the last 40 years, since it has not been done, the 1 hour has not been done, except by a few centers like ours, the whatever data we have on complications of diabetes and so on, they're all based on the 2 hour value. The
Mm-hmm.
2 hour value is actually considered as a gold standard. So now we cannot replace the 2 hour with the 1 hour after all the
Hmm.
work for 50 years. We can't suddenly bring a 1 hour in
Right.
and say,
Yeah.
get rid of the 2 hour. All
Mm-hmm.
we're saying is add one more and do one more sample. That shouldn't be too difficult because to draw one more sample in a lab is not very difficult. There are some labs which actually put in a catheter with a needle.
Hmm.
So from there, you just have to draw the blood. You don't even have to poke once again. There are many labs which just put an indwelling catheter. At
Hmm.
fasting, they'll draw one, 1 hour they'll draw one, 2 hour draw. So there's no extra poking even involved. Even if it means poking once more, it's only once more. It's not
Yeah.
like 5 times like before.
Yeah.
The original test, we used to actually poke them 5 times. Here, 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 all
Hmm.
5 pokes we used to do. Now it's only three. So that way, I think the 1 hour value is. Now, the other thing is that if you're doing additional tests, say like you're doing insulin assay along with this to find out how much insulin your body is secreting, the 1 hour and in some cases the 30 minutes also, that's where 30 minutes comes in, that increase, the first increase in the glucose and the will also bring out insulin from the body, and that increase will tell you how much insulin is being produced by your body. By 2 hours, it has already gone down because insulin will come out, glucose will start declining, and then the insulin value will also go down. So by 2 hour, the insulin test is not very useful. Whereas at 30 minutes or even at 1 hour, it is more useful. So the 1 hour value now they have shown in that 250 references we have shown, it not only predicts future diabetes, it also predicts cardiovascular disease.
Okay.
Okay, whether
That's
you will get
important.
cardiovascular disease. It this 1 hour value being high when the fasting and 2 hour is normal. When the 1 hour is high, they have more of cholesterol problems,
Hmm.
triglycerides, blood pressure tends to be higher. They have inflammation. They have all kinds of abnormalities which pre-diabetics have or intermediate hyperglycemia people have. All that is there in the 1 hour value also. So it is really a marker of early glucose changes. And we
Hmm.
want to pick up any disease early, isn't it? You take
Yeah,
cancer.
absolutely.
You want to pick up early, not late when it is already spread. You don't want to. Why are
Right.
we doing this
When the
MRIs and
complications are
CTs?
already there.
Yeah, you can cure the disease earlier or reverse it earlier. Also, at the time when the 1 hour is elevated and the 2 hour and all that are normal, it is easily reversible. That means your beta cell function has not gone,
Hmm.
and it's a stage where your diabetes is just evolving, and that's a stage to catch it, like nip it in the bud, catch it and then reverse it at that stage. So it becomes much easier to achieve remission of diabetes or reversal of diabetes at that stage. By the
Hmm.
time you develop pre-diabetes, part of the pancreas has already started failing. And by the time you develop regular full fledged diabetes, a lot of the pancreatic function has already gone down. From there to reverse is much more difficult. Although people keep talking about reversal all these days, very few are able to reverse once you become florid, you have developed florid diabetes. Whereas in these stages, almost 100% of people can reverse back to normal. So
Yeah.
that's another advantage of picking.
Yeah. So a very important study, now going to the larger issue of
Yeah,
diabetes in India, a very important study that your organization was part of in collaboration with the Indian Council of Medical Research, which
ICMR.
came out last year, showed that
Yeah.
101 million people in India are diabetic.
Yeah.
It's a huge number.
Yeah.
So what do you think are the challenges related to diagnosing and treating, managing diabetes in the country?
Diagnosing, of course, once you do the tests, diagnosing is not very difficult.
Mm-hmm.
And as I said, the GTT is only one test. HbA1c is yet another test. So just by doing a simple HbA1c test with more than 6.5%, it is diabetic. Now you may say, then why don't you do HbA1c? Why do you want to do this
Mm-hmm.
glucose, giving it, waiting 1 hour, 2 hour, all these things? It's not sensitive enough. The HbA1c test can be normal even if your 2 hour value is above 200. Let's
Okay.
say somebody you do an OGTT and the 2-hour value is 220, clearly diabetic. HbA1c will come as 6. So
Mm-hmm.
you're not, if you're only gone by HbA1c, you would have declared that person normal. Okay. So therefore, while there are other tests available, the OGTT, that's why we call the OGTT as the gold standard. So diagnosing is not a problem. Now, what do you do after you diagnose people with diabetes? So there I call it as the ABCD mantra.
Mm-hmm.
The goals of treatment are A, B, C, D. What is A, B, C, D? A stands for HbA1c. So the HbA1c should be brought down to normal, let's say below 6.5 or even below 6. Then you don't develop complications. B stands for blood pressure. So blood pressure should be maintained absolutely normal, let's say 130 by 80 or lower.
Mm-hmm.
Then you don't develop complications. C stands for cholesterol. If the cholesterol values and the bad cholesterol, the LDL cholesterol is kept completely normal, again you will not develop complications. D stands for discipline. Now in that discipline we include diet. After doing all this, if your diet is totally gone, then you're not getting the full benefit. So
Mm-hmm.
diet is included, exercise is important, sleeping on time is important, not smoking is very important. You do all this A, B, C, and then you keep on smoking, then you're going to destroy all your arteries and so on. So not smoking, preferably not drinking, or at least very minimal amounts of alcohol, no alcohol abuse anyway. If you follow these simple things A, B, C, D, then you will definitely be able to prevent complications of diabetes. So in the ICMR NDAB study,
Mm-hmm.
through in an earlier publication, we looked at how many have actually achieved this A, B, C. Simple thing, just A1C should be controlled, blood pressure should be controlled, cholesterol should be controlled. And we are only looked at those who had known diabetes in India, not even pre-diabetic and others who did not know. Turns out that each one of them, the A was achieved in about 35%. The B, blood pressure control, was achieved in about 40 or 50%. The C, cholesterol, was achieved in about 60%, something like that. If you take all the three together, A, B, C, and for D, we took only non smoking. We didn't take anything else. We didn't take diet, exercise, nothing. We just said you should not be a smoker. Okay. If you take this A, B, C, D in India, in the ICMR and DAP study, what we showed was that only 7% of people had all the four. Among 100 people with diabetes, only 7 had all the four under control. So, what does it mean? 93 are not achieving at least one of these.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so you've got a lot of work to do. And this is very simple as far as a practicing doctor is concerned. If you come to me with diabetes to check whether your sugar, BP, cholesterol, and whether you're a smoking, because smoking you can only advise, people have to give up, and or some diet and so on. This is not at all difficult. This is very basic, rudimentary things that any diabetologist should do. If you're able to achieve that, we have shown. When I say we, I have shown that you can live even up to 100 years. Okay, so we showed 40-year survival, 50-year survival, and people living beyond 90, and some even living beyond 100 years of age, if the simple ABCD mantra is maintained. So it's as simple as that. You can have diabetes, but it really doesn't matter. You can live your full lifespan
Mm-hmm.
just like anybody else can live. All you have to do is to follow this ABCD. Now, that's more easily said than done, because people don't go for checkup, they don't go for thing, they don't visit their doctor. They say, oh, these doctors are all calling us to make money. They're not, we should need, I feel fine and therefore I need not go. You will feel fine. Diabetes is a silent killer. It doesn't produce symptoms. Even
Right.
when you have a heart attack, it may not produce symptoms. You can
Mm-hmm.
get heart attacks without symptoms in person with diabetes. So don't wait for symptoms to come. Please go every 3 to 4 months to a diabetes center. Check these simple things and keep them under control. That's all that is needed. Then diabetes is no longer a problem in India.
Yeah. So, no conversation about diabetes can be without these new diabetes drugs that we have. So, as a clinician, how do you see these new diabetes therapies such as GLP agonists
And
and
agonists.
yeah, and compared to the traditional therapies?
Yeah, so the big breakthrough and the big news with the GLP 1 receptor agonists, RA we call them, is the weight loss. So many diabetic medicines that we give, including insulin, including the sulfonylureas, including this pioglitazone, which will drastically increase your weight. Most of these therapies when you're getting treatment, your weight goes up 1 kilo, 2 kilos, 2 kilos, keeps going up, up, up. So while your sugar may be under control, you lost another risk factor you've gained now, obesity.
Right.
Now we have this group of drugs. Of course, the SGLT2s were already there, where a little bit of weight reduction was there. But the GLP-1s have got better and better. The original ones itself, liraglutide, dulaglutide, they were also very good. They were able to reduce the weight somewhat. But when drugs like semaglutide and that is your Ozempic or Wegovy and the new ones which have come,
Tirzepatide.
dramatic
Yeah.
dramatic changes in
Right.
weight, dramatic reduction, 10%, 15% of your weight you can lose. And some of the newer ones like Monjaro and others which are coming, 20% weight loss. And still more to come now. Three drug receptors are coming where you can get 25-30% weight loss. That means you're 100 kilos
That's
become
huge.
70 kilo.
Yeah.
That's huge, and that's like bariatric surgery.
Yeah.
That means it really becomes
Yeah. So do you think it will
affordable
do
and so
away the
on.
need of bariatric surgery completely in?
It will completely replace if these drugs can really work. I mean, what more than 30 kilos, you're not going to get a bariatric surgery, and that's a gruesome thing. Of course, for somebody who's 150 kilos in weight who will die if you don't do the surgery, you have to do. But remember that 1% of deaths are there even in bariatric surgery. People may not accept it. Surgeons who do it will not say. But out of every 100, one has a chance of dying. And many others will have some serious gallstones will form, this will form, that will form. You're cutting the stomach, you're bypassing the intestine, you're really doing a quite a drastic surgery. So unless it is very much indicated, we don't I don't send everybody for bariatric surgery. But with these drugs, if you're able to get 80%, 90% of what bariatric surgery does, why would you go and there's only an injection?
Yeah.
And only side effects now are nausea and thing, which eventually over a period of time many people are able to get over. Of course, cost is a factor. These drugs are very expensive. So the
But then
majority of
even
people,
surgery is expensive. So compared to
surgery is very
surgery,
expensive, and you're going to have even after paying all that,
yeah.
the sometimes the weight comes back after 4 or 5 years, and then you're left with a permanently with so many vitamin deficiencies, this that, and all that, and lifelong you have to be on supplements, and so that is also not a cheap procedure. So I think these drugs are really making big waves, and we hope that it lasts.
Yeah. Thank you so much for joining in this conversation. Thank you so much for the insightful views that you shared with us. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.